This podcast on thinking and problem solving in adolescence was recorded on the 10th of November 2013 by Gearoid Sheehy, Jennie Moore, Emma Hynes, Lisa Grogan and Caitriona Kennedy in the University of Limerick.
The learner outcomes from this podcast are: the learner will be able to identify the different stages of thinking in adolescence. The learner will have established a variety of teaching strategies to encourage healthy cognitive development in the classroom. The learner, as a student teacher, can appreciate the difficult period in which adolescents are going through, especially with regard to their cognitive development.
We will look at how adolescents think and problem solve using Piaget's theory of cognitive development. There are 4 stages, which are the sensory motor stage, pre-operational stage, concrete operational stage and formal operational stage. Our focus, however, is the formal operational stage. It is hypothesized that approximately 11 or 12 years of age, adolescents enter the Piaget has described as the formal operational stage. It is here that adolescents begin to move from concrete to abstract thinking. It is said that adolescents are enabled to think about things that may be possible, about their own thoughts and the thoughts of others, by formally operational thinking. In this 4th and final stage of maturation, it is said that adolescents develop a capacity for hypothetical thinking, thought that involves reasoning about prepositions that may or may not reflect reality. There are 3 stages in the formal operational stage, according to Lucille Parker Children's Hospital. In early adolescent stage, the teenager begins to form and express his or her own thoughts and opinions on many topics, usually on topics related to his or her own life. For example, adolescents can verbalize who they think is the best football team or the best singer. At middle adolescence, focus often expands from this then and includes more philosophical and futuristic concerns. The teenager during this stage has the ability to form their own code of ethics, to develop their own identity, to consider possible future goals, to think about and make their own plans, to begin thinking long term. He or she asks questions such as, what do I think is right? Who am I? What do I want?
In the late stage, while adolescents are able to make personal decisions, the focus is not so much on the self anymore. They have increased thoughts about more global issues such as justice, history, politics and patriotism. Adolescents in this stage may debate or develop intolerance to opposing views. There is a strong focus here on making career decisions, and the adolescent thinks about their own emerging role into adult society. The transition between stages occurs over time. Every adolescent progresses at different rate to the next. There are 2 types of reasoning that help adolescents problem solve. They are inductive and deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning refers to reasoning from one or more specific experiences or facts to a general conclusion. Deductive reasoning refers to a reasoning from a general statement or principle through logical steps to a specific conclusion. Woolfolk explains a problem-solving strategy used by adolescents called hypothetic deductive reasoning. At the level of formal operations, an adolescent's thinking begins to change from thinking about things as they are to what they might be. Ecocentrism is one of the main characteristics of the formal operational stage. Hynes describes ecocentrism of adolescence as the failure to differentiate between the cognitive concerns of others and those of the self. While the adolescent can now cognize the thoughts of others, he or she is not able to recognize where the thoughts of others are directed. The adolescent ecocentrism is said to have 2 main parts, which are described by Hynes as the imaginary audience and the personal fable, and these help account for certain adolescent behaviour.
The imaginary audience can be described as when adolescents believe or think that others are preoccupied with his or her behaviour or appearance, and because of this, he or she can often perform as an actor in front of this audience. The personal fable is whereby the adolescent believes that they are special, unique or invulnerable, and because of that believe that he or she can take risks. However, as the adolescent begins to reach the age of 15 or 16, the egocentrism begins to diminish. Adolescents are inclined to engage in risky behaviour. This might include accidents, binge drinking, contraceptive use and crime. They are also quite vulnerable to peer pressure, and this vulnerability increases between the early adolescence and the middle adolescent stage. The amygdala is the part of the human brain that is responsible for instinctual reactions, including fear and aggressive behaviour. This develops early in the adolescent's brain. The frontal cortex is the area of the brain that controls reasoning and helps us think before we act. This develops later in the brain of an adolescent. Adolescents' brains function differently than adults when decision making and problem solving. Adolescents are more likely to act on impulse, misinterpret social emotions, get into accidents, get involved in fights, and engage in dangerous or risky behaviour. They are less likely to think before they act or pause to consider the consequences of their actions.
The question is, how can we as teachers help adolescents to use formal operations in developing their thinking and problem solving? Although they have left the concrete operational stage, the use of such teaching strategies and materials is still relevant. This can be done by using visual aids such as charts, illustrations, along with challenging graphs and diagrams. The development of formal operational thought is supported by this, especially in the case of covering new material. It is also useful to encourage students to compare and contrast their own experiences to that of characters in stories. It is important that opportunities to explore a range of hypothetical questions are provided to the learners. For example, encouraging students to engage in discussions regarding social issues, or encouraging a student to explore their personal vision of a utopia, for example, a description of a world that has no sex differences. Also, teenagers may have a certain idea of what a teacher or parent should be like. When the reality fails to match their preconceptions, a lot of conflict can occur. It is important that as teachers we ensure that problem solving and scientific reasoning are encouraged among the students. This can be done by setting up group discussions where adolescents design experiments in order to answer questions.
It is essential that as teachers we use materials and ideas that are relevant and relate to young people's lives to teach broad concepts. This may not always be possible, but when it is important that we practice this method. For example, if we are teaching students about poetry, we can encourage them to find lyrics from a popular song that illustrates poetic devices. We can then show the students how the singer has used poetry to communicate the songwriter's intended meaning. To conclude, we can say that the ways in which adolescents think influences their ability to solve problems. As Buchianery said, if it can be thought, it can be done. A problem can be overcome.